Hello everybody. I have a really exciting, fun tutorial to share with you today. It is for this ribbed mohair beanie, and I have a video up already, a beanie tutorial up that I filmed, I think almost 2 years ago at this point. I felt the need to kind of do like a refresher or like a 2.0 version of that video because I've since started making my beanies in a different way. I will show video close-ups of the construction difference. The main thing is that I used to make them in a rectangle, but towards one of the ends I would switch my stitch from a half double crochet to a single crochet, just so that the top like got smaller. But you can kind of notice very subtly like a ring around the top of your head where the stitches change. And since then I've learned this different technique where the rows start out short and like grow each time, and it kind of tapers the hat in a way that looks a lot better in my opinion and really fits your head nicely. And it's still very simple. There's a pattern of 10 rows that you basically repeat. I think I did it 7 times. So you definitely can pick up the pattern quickly. I'm only using single crochets and slip stitches. I finished this in, what time is it? Like probably 4 hours. So it's definitely something that you can whip up quickly. But I adore these hats and I'm really excited to share how to make them. So getting into the materials, I have the yarn information here because I threw the papers away too soon, but I just wanted to give you the details. Everything will also be linked in the description, but I used the Lion brand, I think it's called 24/7 cotton. It's just a worsted weight 4, 100% cotton yarn. The mohair is Drops Alpaca Silk. Technically the mohair that I'm using is alpaca silk because it's just what I had around, but I'm saying mohair because I think that's a word that's commonly used with this like fuzzy yarn look. So I know technically it's not mohair, don't come for me, but you get what I mean. The alpaca silk mohair drops yarn that I used is a worsted weight yarn. So even though I'm using 2 weight 4 yarns, you'd think that you would need like an 8mm hook. I actually used a 4mm hook because it just compresses all the fuzz from the alpaca silk yarn. If you do have a lace weight mohair, I might recommend doubling it up just to add more thickness and meet a similar gauge to what I had. Also, I felt like it was necessary to bring up, you might be wondering why I chose to use cotton and alpaca or mohair, because commonly the point of using alpaca or mohair is that the hat is warmer. So you might think to use something like wool. Totally go for it, use wool if you feel inclined. I just have so many hats that are super warm, which is great for like really cold weather, but it hasn't been getting super cold yet, and I find that if I wear my wool hats, my head starts itching and it just gets really hot under there, and I wanted a beanie that I could wear every day, even in the house, that isn't gonna make me sweat. I hope that makes sense. And so far it's worked. I've worn the wine colored one around the house and I didn't get hot, which is amazing because it still felt nice having something on my head. If you make this hat, please send me a picture of it. I love seeing what you guys make. My Instagram is eliznuts. I hope you guys like it. Here are my hands. So the whole time I make this hat, I'm going to be working with my cotton and my mohair yarn worked together. So make sure that the tension on both of the yarn is even. The mohair, since it's furry, has a tendency to like creep up and tangle and be weird. So just always make sure that they're pulled tightly together and straight. And to make a slip knot, I wrap the yarn around my finger like this, and I stick my finger through here and pull a loop up, pulling that tight, and then I just throw that on my hook and pull it tight around like that. So to start, I'm going to chain 43. It's really important that when you're chaining and working your stitches, you are grabbing both strands of yarn. I'm using kind of a lighter mohair and darker cotton just so you can see the contrast of them, but sometimes it's easy to only pull one strand through and then things kind of get messed up, so just be aware of that as you're working. I did 43 chains, which measures at about 11 inches or 28 centimeters, and then I'm just going to add my extra chain 44 as my turning chain. Then I'm going to flip my row of chains over and work into the back bumps that you see here because it gives a little bit of a cleaner edge later when we're going to seam the hat up. Skipping that first chain from my hook into the second chain, I'm going to work single crochets going into those back bumps, making sure that I grab the mohair and the cotton yarn in every stitch. For this first row, I'm only going to do 34 single crochets. After 34 single crochets, in the following chain bump, you are going to do 1 slip stitch. And you'll notice that there's still chains that you haven't worked into yet, which is how it's supposed to be. So just hang with me and you'll see why. So turn your work, and into this slip stitch, normally when you turn your row, you chain 1 extra, but I found that it adds a little extra bulk that we don't need. So we're actually going to work right back into that slip stitch. And in case this loop on your hook is a little bit too tight to fully turn 180 like that, just give it a little extra slack and then stick your hook right back through both loops of that slip stitch and do 1 single crochet. Then the rest of the way down the row, we're doing single crochets, but we're working in the back loops only. So if you look at that V, we have here the front loop and we have the back loop. In every single crochet, we're going to work just those back loops. Here I'm just working into the last stitch of that row in the back loop. Then I'm going to chain 1 and turn. Still working into the back loops. Starting in this first stitch, I'm doing back loop single crochets for 36 stitches. I'll meet you at the other end at stitch 35. I just worked my 35th single crochet, which should have been in the last single crochet from the previous row. Now, since there's no more stitches left in the row below, I'm going to go to the row of chains and find the next bump that I haven't worked into, and that is where my 36th single crochet is going to be worked into. And then for the 37th stitch, I'm going to slip stitch into the next stitch. And then similarly to what we just did 2 rows ago, I'm going to pull the loop a little bit extra, nothing crazy, just so that when I turn my work, I can insert my hook right back into both loops of that slip stitch to do a single crochet, and then finish all the way down the row, single crochets in the back loops only. Okay, I worked all the way back down that row, finishing with a single crochet. I'm going to chain 1. And a similar pattern to what we just did, we did 34 plus a slip stitch, 36 plus a slip stitch. That's a tongue twister. We're going to do 38 plus a slip stitch, work all the way back down, 40 plus a slip stitch, work all the way back down, and then 42 plus a slip stitch, work all the way back down, which will reach our chain count that we did at the beginning of 43. So for this row, I'm going to do 38 single crochets in the back loops only. I just worked my 37th single crochet, which would be the last possible single crochet I could do from that row. So now I have to jump back down to my chain row to do a single crochet in my 38th stitch of the row, followed by a slip stitch. Turn your work, make sure the loop is loose enough that you can single crochet right back into that slip stitch and work in the back loops all the way down the row. I finished that row, I'm going to chain 1 and turn, now doing 40 single crochets and a slip stitch. Once you reach the end of the previous row, single crochet 1 into the chain below, and slip stitch. Turn your work and single crochet all the way down, going through both loops of the first stitch and the back loops of the rest. Once you reach the end of the row, chain and turn, back loop single crochets until you reach the end of the row previous. I reached the end of the previous row and I'm going to work a single crochet and a slip stitch into those last 2 chains. For the last row of this pattern repeat, we're doing the same thing where we do single crochets all the way down. The first one is through both loops, the rest of them are back loop. We just did 10 rows. I'm counting the chain row as a row. And as you can see, since we started with a short row and every row added 2 stitches, connecting back to that first row of chains, we get this really cool tapered effect. You're going to repeat the same 10 rows minus the chains, so 9 rows, until the hat is able to wrap fully around your head. Once I do that, I'll come back and tell you how many times I repeated it. But essentially this is going to act now as our long row, like the chain row that we started with, and we're going to repeat the exact same thing. So we're doing 34 single crochets, a slip stitch, work back, 36 single crochets, a slip stitch, work back. I'm going to put the pattern on the screen here. Feel free to screenshot it if you think it will help you while you're working. Okay, I completed 7 of those pattern repeats, and here's what it looks like. As you can see, the top starts to get really nicely rounded. And I know I said I completed the 7 pattern repeats, but I actually stopped with 2 stitches left, so I haven't completed my last 2 rows. I do want to end my last row at the top of the hat so I can use that tail to just close up the top. So I'm actually going to do my last row as my second to last row, if that makes sense. So instead of doing 42 single crochets, this is just going to be my last row. So if you have completed the last 2 rows, just undo them. And just for reference, I'm going to flatten this bottom part of the hat out and give you a measurement. It's 19.5 inches or 49 to 50 centimeters. So right now my yarn is still attached, but I'm actually going to sew the seam with a needle. So I'm going to cut my yarn and tie it off. So to estimate how much yarn we're going to need, I'm just going to measure double the height of the hat and then just a little bit extra because I'm always paranoid that I'm not going to have enough, and just cut that. And then I'm going to take the loop that's left on my hook and just do a chain and then pull that yarn all the way through to tie off. Then at the end of my yarn, I'm going to attach my needle. Now it might be hard to tell because the yarn is fuzzy, but you have a row of V's here and you have a row of V's on this side as well. And what we're going to do, if you can picture V's on this side and V's on this side, we're going to be working in the outermost V's. So on the right side, we're going to grab the right part of the V, and on the left side, we're going to grab the left part of the V. Taking my needle, I'll just show you what I mean by that. So here we have a V. On this side, I'm grabbing the right side of the V. And then when I go in on this side, here you can see a V. I'm going to be going in the left part of the V. Obviously, we want to start down here at the first stitch. So I'm going to start on the right side and insert my hook into that right part of the right V and the left part of the left V. And pull your yarn through. Same thing again in the second stitch, V and V. It might seem hard to read on camera. It's a lot easier in person when you can get up close to it. But you're just doing this all the way down, grabbing the outside V's. And it kind of starts to give you like a camouflage look. It's pretty hard to tell where the seam is from both sides, which is what we want, because although this is the wrong side, once we fold the hat, you're gonna have a right side and a wrong side facing out, so it's important that this kind of looks seamless. I will meet you back at the top. Once you work all the way to the top, there should still be this tail left here from when we started, and your yarn you just worked up should be connecting like right at the same spot as that yarn. We're gonna insert our hook in and out all throughout the round hole here, ending back where this tail is so that we can tie off the yarn to secure it. So there's no signs to this, but you can take your needle and just weave it in and out of random spots throughout the hole. And then once you reach back where your other tail was connected, you can pull that yarn to close up the hole. Make sure you pull it tight and make sure the hole's actually closed. And then you can just take these two, I'm gonna actually shorten this to make my life easier, but you can take these two pieces and just tie them in a really tight knot. I even tie it 3 times just to make sure it's extra secure. I did have to start a new skein about here, so I'm also going to weave these ends in. But once you weave your ends in on the wrong side, turn it right side out, and I will meet you back. That is it. Once you turn your hat right side out, just give the bottom a fold, and you are done. Here's what the wine-colored one looks like. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Again, if you make it, please send me a picture on Instagram. My Instagram is @eliznuts. I will see you in my next video. Bye!